As heated discussions continue to rage in the corridors of the Vatican and in the living rooms of the faithful, the situation becomes increasingly intricate. Behind the scenes, intellectuals, theologians, and even former members of the clergy are questioning the future of the Church. Some see these events as the dawn of a new era, in which authenticity and the search for truth will become the cornerstone of a renewed faith, while others fear that we are witnessing a slow dismantling of centuries-old traditions. The dialogue within the Church has taken on tones that go well beyond mere doctrinal debate. A fervent debate has emerged on the very nature of spirituality. Some young theologians, who grew up in an era in which cultural pluralism and interreligious dialogue are the norm, propose a vision of faith that can embrace change without renouncing historical roots. In this context, synodality is presented as a way to rediscover a community united in dialogue, an idea that risks being distorted when it is associated with compromises on doctrine. Bishop Lorenzo Bianchi, a prominent figure and fearless in his sincerity, has made no secret of his fears. For him, the synodal initiative is like a river in flood that, if not controlled, can overflow and carry away the very identity of the Church. "We cannot accept that our faith becomes a mosaic of partial truths," he said during a conference in a small town in southern Italy, where people gathered with attentive eyes and hearts full of hope. Bianchi warns, the idea of a pope reduced to a symbol, without the power he has always represented, risks weakening the spiritual and moral authority of the Church, creating a void that could be filled by external forces and foreign ideologies. On the opposite side, Cardinal Giovanni Rinaldi, known for his pragmatism and his ability to mediate between the various souls of Christianity, expressed his vision in an equally intense way. Rinaldi argues that a profound reform is necessary to respond to the challenges of the contemporary world. According to him, dialogue with other confessions does not imply a dilution of faith, but rather a renewed openness that could lead to greater mutual understanding. Faith must not be seen as a prison, but as a path in which every step towards dialogue is a step towards the truth, he said in an interview with a well-known newspaper, trying to convey a message of hope and innovation. A particularly intriguing element of this transformation is the possible document on deaconesses, which is causing much discussion. The question of the role of women within the Church, a long-standing source of debate, is now taking on a new dimension. The proposal to allow women to hold spiritual leadership roles is seen by some as a natural evolution, a way to respond to the needs of an ever-changing society. However, for others, like Bishop Ferry, this could mark the beginning of a spiral in which the Church, betraying its roots, distances itself from the original truth. According to Ferry, true unity is not achieved by making concessions on the truth, but by embracing what is our divine essence. This contrast has sparked further reflections. If on the one hand modernity calls for inclusiveness and openness, on the other tradition cannot afford compromises that undermine its authority and historical coherence. The tension between the two visions has generated a climate of uncertainty, in which every word, every gesture, is analyzed and deciphered. In the corridors of the ancient basilicas, the shadows of saints and martyrs seem to silently observe the progress and the contemporary crisis, while in the modern seminary lounges there is animated discussion about what the future of faith should be. The young seminarians, who represent the future of the Church, find themselves having to choose between joining an institution that has always welcomed them and the attraction of ideals of renewal that promise a more inclusive and participatory path. This choice, far from simple, reflects the same difficulties that many ancient institutions must face in the modern world. A curious and, at the same time, symbolic aspect is represented by the small daily gestures that multiply in this period of transition. In a small parish in the Roman countryside, for example, an elderly priest has decided to organize weekly outdoor meetings, where young and old openly discuss the issues of faith, politics, and society. These moments of sharing, often accompanied by a cup of coffee or a glass of wine, become real laboratories of dialogue in which old wounds seek to find healing through words and mutual listening. The air, full of ancient smells and memories, becomes the bearer of a hope that, although fragile, lights the way for those who still believe in a better tomorrow for the Church. Meanwhile, the chronicles of this clash of visions are spreading beyond the confines of the Church, fueling heated discussions on social networks and in the news. The polarization between traditionalists and innovators is becoming the leitmotif of debates that involve not only the religious world, but also the political and cultural spheres. There is talk of a possible new social pact, in which the Church is no longer seen as a rigid and immutable entity, but as a living organism, capable of evolving and adapting to changing times. However, this scenario, while on the one hand promising greater flexibility, on the other raises legitimate fears about the loss of that coherence and strength that have always distinguished the Catholic tradition. There is no shortage of anecdotes and testimonies that make the picture even more vivid. In a recent television interview, a young nun told how, during the long hours of prayer and meditation, she perceived a sort of inner calling to seek a truth that transcended the rigid definitions of traditional doctrine. "My faith has always guided me," she said with a trembling voice, "but now I feel the need for renewal, for an authentic dialogue that can unite rather than divide." These words have been making the rounds on the networks, sparking a heated debate. The search for a more intimate and personal spirituality is a call that many have grasped, but which risks being exploited by those who see fragmentation as an opportunity for power. At the center of all this whirlwind of ideas, we cannot forget the role of Pope Francis, who finds himself having to mediate between contrasting visions and pressures of all kinds. His work, often interpreted in very different ways, has become the symbol of a church in evolution, but also of an institution that struggles to find the right balance between tradition and innovation. The Pope, with his attentive gaze and his decisive step, seems to be trying to guide the boat in stormy waters, without however managing to calm all the anxieties. Some believers see him as a courageous reformer, capable of breaking with conventions to open new perspectives, while others accuse him of not having the necessary firmness to preserve the integrity of the faith. In this context, the interaction between the various souls of the Church takes on an almost theatrical dimension. Every intervention, every declaration, is like an act of a dramatic representation in which the fate of millions of believers hangs in the balance. Ferry's criticisms, Rinaldi's passionate responses, the reflections of young theologians, are intertwined in a narrative fabric rich in nuances and ambiguities. The Church, once monolithic, now appears as a kaleidoscope of visions and aspirations, where each reflection represents a possible path of salvation or perdition. The future of the Catholic Church, therefore, presents itself as a monumental challenge. On the one hand, the need to renew itself to remain relevant in a rapidly changing world; on the other, the duty to keep intact the truth that has guided centuries of history and faith. The compromise, if it exists, must be found in an open and sincere dialogue, where the fears and hopes of each side are listened to with respect and honesty. Only in this way, perhaps, can we avoid the spiritual storm from turning into an irreparable disaster. As the controversy continues to rage, one wonders what the real price of this renewal is. The metaphor of the ship in a storm has never been so fitting. The Church, fragile and proud, navigates treacherous waters, where every decision could mean salvation or ruin. In this scenario, the call to tradition becomes a lifeline for those who fear change, while the call to modernity is seen by others as an invitation to a new era of awareness and inclusion. The path to a possible authentic unity has never been linear. If history teaches us anything, it is that every great transformation brings with it moments of crisis, but also opportunities to rediscover the deepest essence of faith. Today, as the Church finds itself at a crossroads, a path opens up that, although full of obstacles, could lead to a spiritual rebirth capable of integrating the old and the new, without betraying the identity that has always defined Christianity. Ultimately, our story is not just a chronicle of tensions and contradictions, but a living tale of men and women who, with the courage to seek the truth, are willing to question even the pillars on which their existence is based.